The last day of the war began with thunder that wasn't from the sky. The ground of Kareth 9 shook like a dying beast as explosions tore through the dust and smoke. Human soldiers ran for cover, shouting through cracked helmets, their voices breaking in static. Among them was Private Daniel Ward, his uniform covered in ash and blood that wasn't all his own. His rifle jammed, his comms were dead, and his squad, his brothers, were gone. He hid behind the remains of a scorched transport, breathing hard. The air was thick with heat and the smell of metal burning. Above him, the alien ships moved like shadows across the sun, sleek and silent. Their energy beams painted the battlefield in blue light, erasing everything they touched. Daniel was tired in a way that went beyond the body. He had been fighting for years, moving from one broken world to another, carrying orders that no longer made sense. The war between humans and the Volari Empire had started over territory, then turned into revenge, then just hate. No one remembered why anymore. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is how it ends." When the next blast hit nearby, Daniel was thrown to the ground. He tasted blood and dust. His ears rang. He blinked through the haze and saw the human banner burning beside him. The wind carried the sound of alien voices, smooth, cold, echoing across the field. He reached for his weapon, but his hands trembled too much to hold it. Then everything went quiet. The bombardment stopped. The hum of ships faded. The world felt suddenly empty, like even death had paused to watch. Daniel lifted his head. Through the smoke, he saw shapes moving. Tall, silver-armored figures with glowing lines running through their bodies. The Volari. He had never seen them this close before. They were both terrifying and beautiful, like living statues made of glass and lightning. Their eyes glowed faint blue, their movements too graceful for war. One of them stepped forward, her armor shimmering in the dull red sunlight. She was not like the others. She didn't carry a weapon. Her crown of crystal horns caught the light, scattering it like rain. Daniel stared. She was taller than him, her skin faintly luminescent, her face calm and unreadable. But her eyes were sad. The Volari soldiers spread out around her, forming a circle. One of them spoke in their tongue, the sound sharp and melodic. Daniel didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Threat, command, judgment. He swallowed and raised his empty hands. "I surrender," he said weakly. "I'm done fighting." For a moment, no one moved. Then the woman, the one with the crown, stepped closer. Her voice was softer than the wind. "Human soldier," she said, her accent delicate, her words careful and slow. "Do not fear." Daniel blinked in surprise. She was speaking his language. "You fought with courage," she said, her glowing eyes studying him. "You did not run. You did not beg. That means something to us." He didn't know what to say. His throat was dry, his heart pounding. All he had ever heard of the Volari was that they were cold and merciless. Yet this woman, this alien princess, was looking at him as if she saw something worth saving. "Who are you?" he whispered. She tilted her head slightly. "I am Soraya Valthir, daughter of the High Monarch. This battle is over. You will not die today." Her soldiers moved forward, binding his hands in a band of soft blue light. He expected pain, but it only felt warm, like being touched by sunlight. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why spare me?" She looked at him for a long time, her eyes reflecting the burning sky. "Because," she said, "even enemies can carry honor. And perhaps peace begins with one." Then she turned and walked back toward her ship. Daniel was pulled along, too weak to resist, too lost to understand. As he looked back one last time at the battlefield, the graves of both sides melting into smoke, he realized something strange. The war had ended not with a scream, but with silence. And in that silence, an alien princess had looked at him not as a foe, but as a man. He didn't know it yet, but that moment would be the beginning of everything. Daniel woke to the soft hum of a ship. The walls were smooth, pale, and glowing faintly blue, like they were alive. For the first time in years, he felt a moment of calm. There were no explosions, no shouting, no burning ground beneath him. Just quiet. He tried to move and noticed his hands were free. No chains, no restraints. Just a simple bed, a tray of food, and a faint scent of something sweet he couldn't name. A soft knock came at the door. Daniel's heart raced. He expected a guard or an interrogator. Instead, the door slid open and Soraya entered. She was even more striking up close. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, and her eyes held something Daniel couldn't name. something gentle yet commanding, like she belonged to both the stars and the wind. "Good morning, human soldier," she said. Her voice was musical, soft and slow, as if each word had been chosen with care. "You slept well?" Daniel blinked. I guess. Where am I?" "You are aboard the Valari flagship," she answered simply. "Your body needs rest. Your mind will follow." He looked at her, confusion and suspicion mixing in his chest. "I'm your prisoner, right?" She shook her head. "No, not a prisoner. A guest and a witness." Daniel wanted to argue, to demand answers, but her presence held him silent. There was something in the way she spoke, calm yet sure, that made it hard to feel anger. Each day, Soraya visited him. At first she spoke little, observing him quietly. But slowly she began to speak in his language, carefully, as if tasting each word. She asked about Earth, about the sun, about small things, trees, rivers, laughter. "You fight with courage," she said one day, sitting near him on a curved bench. "Even when hope is gone, my people, they respect that." Daniel shook his head. "I was just trying to survive. Anyone would do the same." "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "Humans are remarkable. Even in war, you still choose to save, to protect. That choice, it matters." Daniel studied her. She wasn't trying to charm him. She was sincere. He wanted to believe her, but he had lived long enough to know the danger of hope. Yet slowly, he began to notice the small things. How her eyes softened when she spoke about Earth. How she seemed genuinely curious about his world. How she never raised her hand in anger, even when her soldiers watched him closely. One evening, she led him to the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly, far brighter than he had ever seen from Earth. "Each star is a story," she whispered. "Some stories end in fire, some in peace. I want peace. I want it for you and for us." He felt a lump in his throat. After years of fighting, of watching friends die in flames, it was almost too much to see beauty again. Almost too much to hear kindness from someone he had been taught to fear. "You speak as if you know me," Daniel said quietly. "I do," she replied. "I see what others do not." Courage is visible even in the darkest places. In those quiet moments, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in years. Trust. Not blind trust, but the fragile kind, the kind that could grow if nurtured. And yet he still remembered the war. He still remembered the screams. He still remembered how the Valari had destroyed whole worlds without hesitation. But Soraya, she was different. She did not carry the weight of cruelty. She carried something else, a hope that maybe humans and Valari could see each other as more than enemies. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that peace was possible. That even in a galaxy full of hatred, there could be a connection between two very different beings. Daniel didn't know then that she was testing him, learning him, and somehow choosing him. That she would change the course of his life, not with weapons or threats, but with a quiet persistence that only the strongest hearts possess. And for the first time since Kareth 9 burned, Daniel dared to hope. Days passed aboard the Valari flagship, but Daniel's mind never stopped spinning. Every corner of the ship was alien yet strangely beautiful. Walls of glowing crystal, corridors that seemed to hum beneath his feet, and windows that showed stars brighter than he had ever imagined. Yet despite all the marvels, he felt out of place, a human among beings built for worlds he couldn't even begin to understand. Soraya, however, moved through it all as though she belonged to everything. Her presence was calm, commanding, yet gentle. Every day she visited him, and each time she came closer, she spoke more freely. They talked of Earth, of oceans, forests, and sunsets. She laughed softly when he described simple human foods and made notes in her delicate alien script. Daniel found himself smiling again, a feeling he had forgotten long ago in the fire of war. But the peace was fragile. One morning, Soraya entered his quarters wearing ceremonial armor, shining faintly like water under light. Daniel stood quickly, instinctively tense, expecting her to issue a command or summon guards. But she simply walked closer, her eyes glowing with an intensity he could not ignore. "My father has ordered your release," she said, her voice steady yet tender. "You are no longer a prisoner." "But I have chosen differently." Daniel frowned. "Chosen differently?" His voice was cautious. Every instinct told him to question, to doubt, to prepare for betrayal. She knelt slightly, lowering her face to his level. Her silver hair caught the light and her eyes softened. You saved 3 of my warriors in battle, she said. We reviewed your records, your actions. You could have killed them, but you did not. You chose to drag them to safety instead. Daniel shook his head, his chest tightening. I didn't even know they were Valari. I was just surviving. That does not matter, she said softly. Courage is not measured by who you fight, but by what you do in the moment that matters. My people have a saying, the one who saves another is bound to honor no matter the side. Daniel swallowed. Her words were simple, yet they carried a weight that pressed against his chest. He had spent years in war, believing that killing or surviving was all that mattered, and now this alien princess, this enemy, was speaking as though his actions were noble. Then she did something Daniel did not expect. She moved closer, her hand brushing his shoulder in a gesture that was at once gentle and possessive. Her warmth seeped into him, a calm unlike anything he had felt in years of fire and smoke. My people say, you're mine now, she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Daniel froze. The words were alien and impossible, yet they carried a strange clarity. They were not a threat. They were a statement, a recognition, an acknowledgement of his courage and his humanity. He looked at her, searching for meaning, for intention. Her gaze held nothing but truth. There was no manipulation, no conquest, only recognition. What does that mean? He asked, his voice hoarse. It means, she said, lifting her hand slightly as if to emphasize the weight of her words, that your bravery has touched something deeper than politics, than war. It binds us in a way that words cannot fully explain. Perhaps a bond of honor and maybe more. Daniel could barely breathe. He had fought for survival, for revenge, for duty. He had never imagined that survival could lead to recognition, let alone from someone like Soraya. For the first time, he realized that war was not the measure of humanity. Courage, mercy, and choice were, and in her eyes he saw reflected the part of himself he had almost forgotten, the part that could still hope, still feel, still matter. And so in that quiet room aboard a ship from another world, a human soldier understood the beginning of something that neither of them could yet name, something beyond battle, beyond blood, beyond fear, something that was slowly, quietly, binding their souls together. The Valari fleet moved through the black sea of stars with silent grace, leaving behind Kareth 9 and the echoes of war. Daniel stood at the edge of the observation deck, staring at the endless expanse, feeling small and fragile. His hands shook slightly even though the ship's gravity kept him steady. He had survived the battlefield, yet somehow the quiet stillness of space felt heavier than any gunfire. Soraya appeared beside him, her presence calm, like the soft pulse of the stars themselves. It is strange, isn't it? She said, her voice carrying a hint of curiosity. To move from fire and blood into silence so vast. Daniel nodded, unsure if he could find words. It feels like I don't belong here. I'm a human, and this is your world, your people. I'm just out of place, she smiled softly, tilting her head to study him. Then perhaps it is good that you do not belong. Perhaps you are here to remind us that there are others beyond our rules, beyond our hatred, who can teach us something new. Her words struck him. He had spent years being taught to hate the Valari, to see them as monsters. And yet, this princess, this enemy who should have been untouchable, spoke as if he had worth, humanity worth noticing. Days turned into nights, though the stars never truly slept. Daniel began to learn their ways slowly. He studied their light chants, the intricate sounds that carried both music and meaning. Soraya was patient, teaching him one syllable at a time. In return, he taught her human songs, simple tunes about rivers and mountains, about laughter and longing. She laughed softly at his mistakes, her eyes sparkling with amusement, and Daniel felt warmth spread through him, a feeling he thought war had stolen forever. But even as their bond grew, the world outside remained dangerous. Whispers of mistrust followed him everywhere. Valari soldiers watched him carefully, some curious, some openly suspicious. Humans in hidden corners of the galaxy would never forgive what the Valari had done, and he knew that if he returned, they might never see him as more than a traitor. One evening, Soraya led him to a small garden inside the ship, a strange pocket of life, plants glowing faintly, their leaves moving with the ship's vibrations. Here, she said, even among the stars, life finds a way. Daniel knelt beside a small, glowing flower. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "I never imagined something like this could exist." "Life is everywhere," she whispered. "It survives even when destruction seems to have won. And perhaps, so does hope." He looked at her, noticing the faint silver lines beneath her skin that pulsed like veins of light. Her gaze met his, calm yet unwavering, as if she could see the war in his heart and still find the good buried deep within. "I don't know if I belong here," he admitted quietly. "I don't know if humans like me can ever really be accepted by your people." "You belong here," she said simply, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Not because you are like us, but because you remind us what courage, mercy, and hope can look like. You are human, yes, but that is why you matter." Her words felt like a tether to something greater than fear or survival. For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to imagine a life beyond war, a life where he could stand beside her, not as a soldier, not as a prisoner, but as someone who had chosen to see hope even in darkness. The stars stretched endlessly above them, cold yet comforting. Daniel realized that he was beginning to care, not just for his survival, but for hers. Not just for peace, but for the fragile, dangerous, beautiful possibility that two worlds, once enemies, could grow together. And as the ship sailed through the void, Daniel knew something that scared him as much as it excited him. He was no longer just a human soldier. He was part of something bigger, part of a story that crossed worlds, crossed war, and might, just might, change the galaxy itself. For the first time, he felt the fragile pull of belonging. And with Soraya beside him, he dared to hope that belonging might not be impossible. The quiet of the Valari flagship shattered like glass one night. Explosions rocked the halls, alarms blared, and the low hum of the ship's engines became a deafening roar. Daniel bolted upright in his quarters, heart pounding, hands shaking. He had survived battles on countless worlds, but nothing had prepared him for the chaos erupting around him now. A group of Valari rebels had stormed the palace fleet. Their leader, Torvak, a general who despised Soraya's compassion, sought to overthrow the princess and claim the throne. His soldiers moved with lethal precision, plasma weapons glowing red as they tore through corridors. The fleet, once a symbol of control, had become a war zone. Daniel grabbed a fallen weapon from a guard, unfamiliar yet strangely responsive in his hands. He ran toward the main hall, guided by instinct and fear. Each step brought him closer to the woman he had come to care for, the princess who had shown him kindness when no one else had. Soraya was there, standing tall amidst the chaos. Her armor glimmered faintly even in the sparks and smoke, her eyes glowing like twin stars. Around her, loyal guards fought bravely, but the rebels outnumbered them. Daniel's chest tightened as he saw a plasma bolt strike near her shoulder, sending a shockwave of heat across the floor. "Daniel," she shouted over the cacophony. "Leave me. Go live." But he could not move. He refused to run. Not from her, not now. Not ever. He charged forward, swinging the alien blade with desperation and raw determination. Every movement felt instinctive, a fusion of fear, anger, and something deeper, something he had never felt in all his years of war. He fought not for survival, not for orders, but for her, for the woman who had looked at him as more than a soldier, more than a human, more than a pawn in a war that seemed endless. The rebels faltered, stunned by the human's ferocity. They had never seen him move like this, human strength combined with courage that defied expectation. Every strike was precise, every dodge measured. He moved like fire-made flesh, unwilling to yield, unwilling to let her fall. Soraya watched him, her heart beating fast. She realized then that his bravery wasn't just survival, it was something deeper. He risked everything, not for glory, not for duty, but because he cared. The fight reached its climax when Torvak himself lunged at Soraya. Daniel intercepted, thrusting the alien blade with everything he had. Torvak faltered, the momentum broken by raw human will. Daniel pressed on, his body screaming in pain, his arms shaking, but he did not stop until the general fell. When the last rebel fell, silence returned, but it was different this time. The ship hummed quietly again, as if mourning the chaos it had witnessed. Daniel stood there, bleeding, exhausted, trembling, but alive. Soraya rushed to his side, her hands gentle as she examined his injuries. "You saved me," she whispered, eyes shining with something he had never seen before. relief, gratitude, awe. You risked everything, not because you had to, but because you chose to. Daniel's chest heaved. He looked at her, trying to speak, but words failed him. In the heat of battle, in the fear and blood, he had discovered something he hadn't known he was capable of. Courage wasn't just fighting. It was protecting, loving, and choosing to stand even when the world tried to break you. Soraya took his hand, her fingers warm and firm. "My people will speak of this," she said softly. "They will see your heart, Daniel. They will see what I have seen all along. You are not just human. You are remarkable." For the first time in years, Daniel allowed himself to feel pride. Not in victory, not in survival, but in who he had become. The war had left scars, yes, but it had also revealed something undeniable. Even a single human could shine in a galaxy of stars and darkness. And as they stood together amidst the aftermath, Daniel realized a truth he could never unsee. Bravery, mercy, and love could exist even in the harshest of worlds. The rebellion ended, but the scars it left ran deep. The palace on Valerian was quiet now, its crystal walls still carrying faint marks of the battle. Outside, the two moons rose together, casting silver light across the great city. Inside, the people gathered in silence, waiting for their new ruler to ascend the throne. Soraya stood before the ancient crystal seat, dressed in ceremonial white and silver. The air shimmered around her crown, its light reflecting through the hall like fragments of stars. The weight of leadership was heavy, but her gaze was calm, steady, filled with something her people had forgotten: hope. And beside her stood Daniel Ward, wrapped in a simple robe, his arms still bandaged from the battle. He felt out of place, surrounded by towering figures of glowing armor and elegant robes. Yet when Soraya looked his way, her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, he forgot the staring eyes of the Valari nobles and soldiers who whispered about him, the human who had saved their princess. When the crown touched Soraya's brow, the hall erupted in light. The ancient crystals above began to hum, echoing an old melody that spoke of unity and peace. Soraya rose, her expression serene, and turned to face her people. "My people," she began, her voice echoing softly yet powerfully across the hall. "We have endured war, loss, and betrayal. We have seen darkness tear through our stars and silence our songs. But today we begin again." She paused, her eyes finding Daniel in the crowd. "You all know of the human who stood beside me when even our own turned against us. He fought not for his race, not for glory, but because it was right. He risked his life for me, for us." The hall fell into complete silence. Thousands of glowing eyes turned toward Daniel. He felt his chest tighten. The air felt heavy, yet Soraya's voice carried him through. "Courage is not bound by blood," she continued softly. "Honor is not born from the stars we come from. It is born from the heart, and this man, this human, carries a heart that shines brighter than any crown." Then, before all of Valerian, she stepped down from her throne and took his hand. The gasps in the crowd were audible, but Soraya did not waver. "This man is Daniel Ward of Earth," she said proudly. "He is bound to me by honor and by choice. Let no one question his place here. He is one of us now." Daniel felt the heat rise behind his eyes. He had been called many things in his life: soldier, survivor, killer, but never something like this. Never one of us. When the ceremony ended and the crowds began to disperse, Soraya and Daniel found themselves on the palace balcony. The night wind was cool, carrying the faint hum of the city below. The stars hung low and bright as if listening. Soraya leaned against the railing beside him. Her crown shimmered faintly in the moonlight. "It's strange," she said softly. "I was taught that a queen must stand alone, but I feel stronger with you beside me." Daniel looked at her, unsure of what to say. "You don't need me, Soraya. You're everything your people need already." She smiled faintly. "And yet, when I look at you, I remember why I wanted peace in the first place." He turned his gaze to the stars. "Peace," he said quietly. "It feels fragile, like it could break any second." "Then we protect it," she said gently. "You and I together." There was a long silence. The sound of the wind filled the space between them. Then softly she reached for his hand, her silver fingers intertwining with his. "I told you once," she whispered, "that my people say you're mine now. But now I think I belong to you just as much." Daniel felt his heart ache in a way he hadn't felt since before the war. Ache not from loss, but from something deep, alive, and real. He looked at her and smiled faintly. Then I guess we belong to each other. The two stood there beneath the twin moons, a human soldier and an alien queen, bound not by war or blood, but by something far stronger, hope, love, and the promise of a better tomorrow. The years that followed were quiet, peaceful. Even under Soraya's rule, Valerian began to heal. The shattered towers were rebuilt, the people sang again, and for the first time in generations, the skies were free of warships. Daniel stayed by her side, not as a soldier anymore, but as her advisor, her protector, and something more that neither of them spoke aloud too often. But peace, as always, was fragile. Whispers came from the border systems, rogue fleets, angry warlords, and scavenger empires that refused to bow to the new peace. Daniel had seen it before. He knew how quickly a single spark could ignite the galaxy again. One evening, as the golden sun of Valerian dipped below the clouds, Daniel stood with Soraya on the balcony, where their promise was first made. She looked older now, though still radiant, her crown resting on the table beside her. Her eyes, once filled with fire, now carried something gentler, peace mixed with worry. "You can feel it too, can't you?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. The silence before the storm. She turned to him. "I wanted to believe that love and unity could be enough." "It is enough," he said quietly. "But peace doesn't keep itself. Someone has to fight to protect it." Her voice trembled slightly. "And you would fight again?" Daniel smiled faintly. "If it keeps you safe, I would." She closed her eyes for a long moment, then reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were cool and trembling slightly. "You humans," she murmured, her voice breaking. "You never stop sacrificing." He chuckled softly. "And you aliens never stop worrying." That night he left her chambers quietly and walked through the palace halls alone. He stopped before the statue they had built after the war, a tall figure of crystal and stone, carved in memory of all who had fallen. His reflection shimmered faintly in the crystal surface. "I thought I was done fighting," he whispered. "Guess I was wrong." When the first reports arrived at dawn, the skies were already burning. A fleet of raiders had attacked a colony world at the edge of Valerian space. Soraya ordered the royal guard to prepare defenses, but Daniel didn't wait. He went to the hangar, strapping himself into an old starfighter, the one he'd once flown during the war. As the engines came alive, he heard her voice through the comms. "Daniel, stop." "You don't have to do this," he smiled faintly. "I told you once, Soraya. My people say you're mine now, but maybe it's the other way around." "Come back to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I will," he promised. "I always do." And then the stars swallowed him. The battle was fierce. Dozens of ships tore through the blackness, streaks of light crossing the void like dying stars. Daniel flew with a calm he hadn't felt in years, each movement sharp, each shot perfect. He wasn't fighting for Earth this time. He wasn't fighting for revenge. He was fighting for her. Hours later, when the smoke cleared, the raider fleet was gone. Valerian was safe once again. But Daniel's ship never returned. For days, Soraya waited. Her eyes searched the skies, her heart refusing to accept the silence. She sent search teams, signals, prayers, but the stars gave no answer. One night, weeks later, she stood alone on the same balcony where they had once stood together. The wind whispered softly through the crystal gardens below. She held his broken communicator in her hands, pressing it to her heart. "You promised," she whispered. "You said you'd come back." And then she looked up. High above, a new star flickered to life, small, bright, and steady. The astronomers said it wasn't there before. Soraya smiled through her tears. "Then watch over me, my human," she said softly. "Watch over us all." Years passed. Songs were written about the human who loved a queen from the stars. Children grew up hearing tales of Daniel Ward, the man who taught the Valeri that courage and love were not born from blood, but from the heart. And on quiet nights when the twin moons shone above the crystal towers, the people said their queen could still be seen sitting on her balcony, her eyes turned toward that one small star that never faded, the star that was his, the promise that never died.